Jerry John Rawlings, A Life That Recast Ghana. Birth Origins and Early Formation, 1947-1966. Jerry John Rawlings was born on June 22, 1947, in Accra, in the Gold Coast, just a decade before the territory would emerge as independent Ghana. His birth itself symbolized a convergence of worlds. His father, James Ramsay John Rawlings, was a Scottish chemist working in the Gold Coast, while his mother, Victoria Agbotui, was an Ewe woman from Zelukope near Keita in the Volta region. This mixed heritage placed Rawlings at a cultural crossroads from the very beginning, shaping a worldview that was both local and international, Ghanaian and global. Raised primarily by his mother, Rawlings grew up during a period of intense political awakening. Ghana, under Kwame Nkrumah, was positioning itself as the vanguard of African independence and Pan-Africanism. The ideals of sovereignty, dignity, and social justice were not abstract concepts during Rawlings' youth. They were part of everyday political conversation. These early years coincided with both the optimism of independence and the turbulence that followed Nkrumah's overthrow in 1966, events that deeply influenced Rawlings' understanding of power, corruption, and national purpose. Military education and the making of a fighter pilot, 1967-1978. Rawlings entered the Ghana Armed Forces at a young age, enrolling at the Ghana Military Academy at Teshi. He later trained as a fighter pilot, earning a reputation for discipline, courage, and technical competence. By the 1970s, he was a flight lieutenant in the Ghana Air Force, a rank that belied his growing influence among junior officers and enlisted personnel. During this period, Ghana was marked by chronic political instability, frequent military coups, economic decline, and widespread public frustration. Soldiers were poorly paid, corruption was visible at the highest levels of government, and public trust in leadership had eroded. Rawlings became increasingly vocal, expressing anger at what he perceived as moral decay within both civilian and military leadership. This outspoken nature, unusual for a junior officer, set him apart and foreshadowed his later role as a revolutionary figure. The first coup attempt and the birth of a populist icon, 1979. On May 15, 1979, Rawlings led an attempted coup against the ruling Supreme Military Council. The coup failed, and Rawlings was arrested, tried publicly, and sentenced to death. However, the trial transformed him into a national symbol. In court, Rawlings delivered fiery speeches accusing Ghana's leaders of betraying the nation through corruption and greed. These statements resonated powerfully with ordinary Ghanaians, especially soldiers and young people. Before the sentence could be carried out, Rawlings was freed on June 4, 1979, in a mutiny led by sympathetic soldiers. This event marked one of the most dramatic turning points in Ghana's history. Rawlings emerged from prison to lead the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, AFRC, seizing power and declaring a house-cleaning exercise aimed at purging corruption from Ghanaian public life. The AFRC era, Revolutionary Justice and Controversy, 1979. The AFRC period was brief but intense. Rawlings and his colleagues executed several former military leaders, including former heads of state, in what they described as revolutionary justice. Assets were confiscated, public officials were punished, and the rhetoric of accountability dominated national discourse. To supporters, Rawlings was a fearless reformer restoring moral order. To critics, he was a ruthless figure presiding over extrajudicial killings and human rights abuses. What is undeniable is that this period permanently altered Ghana's political psychology. Fear, hope, and radical change coexisted in a nation uncertain of its future. Remarkably, Rawlings handed over power to a democratically elected civilian government later in 1979, led by President Hilla Liman. This decision initially distinguished him from many African coup leaders and suggested a complex relationship with power rather than a simple desire to rule indefinitely. Return to Power and the PNDC Revolution, 1981-1992. The Lyman government soon struggled with economic collapse, political paralysis, and declining authority. On December 31, 1981, Rawlings staged another coup, overthrowing the civilian administration and establishing the Provisional National Defense Council, PNDC. This time, the takeover was more deliberate, ideological, and structured. Under the PNDC, Rawlings ruled Ghana as a military head of state for over a decade. He promoted concepts of probity, accountability, and grassroots democracy, encouraging the formation of People's Defense Committees and Workers' Defense Committees. These bodies were intended to decentralize power and involve ordinary citizens in governance, though in practice they often reinforced state control. Economically, Rawlings initially adopted socialist rhetoric, but the severity of Ghana's economic crisis forced a pragmatic shift. By the mid-1980s, his government embraced IMF and World Bank-backed structural adjustment programs. These reforms stabilized the economy, reduced inflation, and restored international credibility, but they also imposed social costs, including job losses, and reduced public spending. Transition to democracy and civilian presidency, 1992-2001. By the early 1990s, global political winds were changing. The Cold War had ended, and pressure for democratic governance increased across Africa. Rawlings responded by overseeing a transition to constitutional rule. A new constitution was adopted in 1992, and Rawlings resigned from the military, reinventing himself as a civilian politician. He won the 1992 and 1996 presidential elections as leader of the National Democratic Congress, NDC. As a civilian president, Rawlings focused on consolidating democratic institutions, expanding infrastructure, improving education, and maintaining macroeconomic stability. Ghana experienced relative political calm and became a model of democratic transition in West Africa. Nevertheless, his presidency was not without criticism. Opponents accused him of dominating state institutions, limiting press freedom in earlier years, and presiding over lingering economic inequality. Yet even critics acknowledged that Ghana under Rawlings achieved a level of stability rare in the region. Peaceful transfer of power and elder statesmanship, 2001 to 2010s. In 2001, Rawlings stepped down after serving the constitutional maximum of 2 terms, handing power peacefully to John Agyekum Kufuor of the opposition New Patriotic Party. This act significantly enhanced his international reputation as a leader who ultimately respected democratic norms. In retirement, Rawlings remained politically active, both domestically and internationally.